"He's buried here!" the little waif declared to the desperate millionaire whose son had vanished. Then they dug beneath the altar of the cemetery, unearthing something that shocked everyone. "Comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is vital. Subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help." The grand ballroom of the mansion blazed with crystal chandeliers and floral arrangements that cost more than the annual salary of many families. The charity gala assembled the elite of the Big Apple, all decked out in their finest attire, discussing stock investments and the latest Wall Street moves. The widowed millionaire observed from a distance, his imposing stature and matinee idol looks contrasting with the worried expression he tried to conceal. At 30, he had amassed an impressive fortune through shrewd deals and savvy investments in the financial markets. His assets included real estate, investment funds, and even some cryptocurrency he held as a store of value. But that night, all his wealth seemed insignificant compared to the only thing that truly mattered: his 4-year-old son. The child had disappeared 2 hours ago. One moment he was playing in the backyard garden with other kids, supervised by the nanny, and the next he was simply gone. The millionaire had discreetly mobilized all the property security, but he didn't want to cause panic among the guests. After all, many of them were important business partners and investors. "Sir, we've checked every part of the house again," the head of security whispered in his ear. "No sign of the boy. The cameras show him exiting through the back gate at 8:15 p.m. The father's heart clenched. The back gate led directly to the oldest streets in the city, an area bustling during the day, but practically deserted at night. There stood the century-old cemetery, where generations of the local elite had been interred in elaborate mausoleums that showcased their accumulated wealth over decades. While the guests continued their conversations about profits and dividends, he discreetly headed towards the back of the property. The night was chilly, and fog began to form among the ancient trees that separated his mansion from the cobblestone streets. Each step he took towards the gate amplified his anxiety. That's when he saw her for the first time. A tiny girl, appearing to be only 2 years old despite actually being 4, sat on the curb in front of the cemetery. Her clothes were dirty rags, her unkempt hair partially covering a face too gaunt for a child. She held something in her small, trembling hands. It appeared to be a piece of stale bread. The millionaire hesitated. His priority was finding his son, but something about this abandoned child struck a chord in his heart. He approached, slowly, noticing how she watched him with large, haunted eyes, as if she had seen things no child should witness. "Are you all right, little one?" he asked, crouching down to her level. The girl studied him for a long moment, slowly chewing the piece of bread. When she finally spoke, her voice was a hoarse whisper that sent a chill down his spine. "He's buried here." The man felt as if the world had stopped spinning. "What did you say?" "The boy you're looking for," she continued, pointing towards the ornate gates of the cemetery. "He's in there. I saw them bring him." Disbelief and hope battled within him. How could a street child know about his son? How could she have seen something that his entire security team had failed to discover? But there was something in her eyes, a certainty that went beyond her apparent age. "When did you see this?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "Tonight, the big man carried him. But the boy wasn't hurt," she added quickly, as if sensing the growing desperation on the father's face. "Just sleeping." The millionaire looked at the century-old cemetery, its shadows stretching like dark fingers between the marble monuments. Entire families of the local elite rested there, their fortunes and histories etched into elaborate epitaphs. The idea that his son might be in that place was simultaneously terrifying and incomprehensible. "Can you show me where?" he asked, his voice betraying the urgency he felt. The girl nodded and stood up with difficulty. She was even smaller than she appeared sitting down, her fragility contrasting with the determination in her steps. She led him to the cemetery gates, which were partially open, an oddity, as the place should have been locked at that hour. They walked silently through the stone lanes, passing tombs that held the remains of families who had built their wealth over centuries. Moonlight filtered through the ancient trees, creating dancing shadows on the marble and granite monuments. "There," the girl said, stopping before a particularly imposing mausoleum in the center of the cemetery. The millionaire recognized the place immediately. It was the tomb of the family who had founded the city decades ago, a white marble altar that stood majestically among the other monuments. But something was different. The earth around the base appeared to have been recently disturbed. "Are you sure?" he asked, but the girl was already heading towards a small tool shed at the back of the cemetery. She returned, carrying an old, rusty shovel, too large for her small hands. "You need to dig there," she said, pointing to a specific spot next to the mausoleum. "Not too deep." The father's heart pounded as he took the tool. Part of him couldn't believe he was following the instructions of a street child, digging in a cemetery in the middle of the night. But the desperation to find his son outweighed any rational hesitation. He began to dig. The earth gave way more easily than the millionaire expected, as if it had been recently disturbed. With each shovelful, his anxiety grew. The girl remained by his side, watching silently, her eyes reflecting a wisdom unsettling for someone so young. After 20 minutes of digging, the shovel struck something solid. It wasn't what he feared finding. Instead of a small body, his trembling hands uncovered a wooden chest buried less than 3 feet below the surface. The object was surprisingly well preserved, as if it had been placed there recently. "Open it," the girl whispered, her voice carrying an urgency that made his heart race. With trembling fingers, the millionaire lifted the lid of the chest. The contents left him breathless. Photographs of his son sleeping, clearly taken in the past few days. Documents with detailed information about the child's routine, activity schedules, names of teachers and friends. But what shocked him the most were the personal objects. The boy's favorite teddy bear, a drawing the child had made at school the previous week, and a lock of blonde hair carefully kept in an envelope. At the bottom of the chest, a handwritten letter with handwriting he recognized immediately. His breathing became erratic when he realized whose those familiar words were. It was the writing of his younger brother, who everyone believed was studying abroad for the past 5 years. "Dear brother," the letter began, "the time has finally come for you to understand what it means to lose everything you love. As I did when our parents chose to leave all the inheritance to you, when they sent me away as if I were a burden, when the entire family fortune was concentrated in your hands while I was forgotten." The millionaire felt his legs buckle. His brother had never left to study abroad. For all these years he had been here, in the same city, planning this elaborate revenge. The letter continued with bitter details about how he had watched his brother's prosperous life from afar, seeing him build a financial empire with the capital that should have been divided between them. "Your son is safe with me for now, but now you will experience the despair I felt when I was abandoned by my own family. Every day that passes without you finding him is another day that you understand my 5 years of exile." The girl tugged at his sleeve urgently. "He's not here anymore," she said, pointing in different directions in the cemetery. "The big man moved the boy after he buried this. They went down." "Down?" repeated the millionaire, uncomprehending. The child led him to an old crypt at the back of the cemetery, half hidden by vegetation that had grown around it for decades. The stone structure appeared to have been abandoned for a long time, but as they approached, they noticed that the entrance had been recently cleared. "There are stairs that go down," explained the girl. "Many stairs, like a house under the ground." The millionaire looked at the crypt with new understanding. The old city had a network of underground tunnels dating back centuries, built by the wealthiest families as shelters and storage. Many had been forgotten over time, but some were still accessible through entrances, like that one. "How do you know all this?" he asked, finally asking the question that had intrigued him since their first encounter. The girl lowered her eyes, nervously fiddling with the hem of her torn clothes. "I live here sometimes when it's too cold outside. The big man lets me stay, gives me food." The revelation hit him like a punch to the stomach. His brother had not only planned the kidnapping, but was also secretly taking care of an abandoned child. The situation was far more complex than he initially imagined. "He's good to me," continued the girl, as if she felt the need to defend the man who had kidnapped his son. "He teaches me to read, tells me stories, but he gets very sad when he talks about the brother who doesn't like him." The millionaire's heart ached upon hearing those words. For years, he had assumed that his brother was living a prosperous life abroad with the same privileged education he had received. He never questioned his parents' decision to leave the entire inheritance to him, the eldest son. He simply accepted it as natural that the entire family fortune, including the shares of the family business and investments in gold, would remain under his control. "Can you take me to where they are?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. The girl hesitated, looking alternately at him and at the entrance to the crypt. "The big man said that if someone came looking, I should warn him first. But you look very sad, like he does when he looks at the photos." "What photos?" "Old photos. Of two boys playing together. He says that one of the boys forgot about the other when he got rich." The millionaire felt a wave of guilt wash over him. Childhood memories began to return. Him and his brother playing in the backyard of the family mansion, making plans to work together in the company when they grew up, promising to divide everything equally. But as he grew up and took on more responsibilities in the business, he gradually forgot those childish promises. "I can try to convince him to let you see the boy," said the child after a long silence. "But you have to promise you won't hurt him." "I promise," he replied immediately. "I just want my son back." The girl nodded and began to descend the stone stairs leading to the underground tunnels. The millionaire followed her, using his cell phone's flashlight to illuminate the way. The air grew more humid and cold with each step, and the smell of mold mixed with damp earth filled his nostrils. The tunnels were more elaborate than he had imagined. Stone corridors stretched in various directions, some leading to chambers that probably served as storage for the wealthy families of the time. Others seemed to connect different parts of the underground city that few people knew existed. After walking for almost 15 minutes through the stone labyrinth, the girl stopped before a heavy wooden door. From the other side came the muffled sound of voices, a male voice, deep and familiar, and a child's voice that made the father's heart race. "He's there," whispered the child. "Your son is okay. The big man takes care of him like he takes care of me." The millionaire pressed his ear against the door and could clearly distinguish the voice of his brother telling a story to a child. It was the same story that he himself used to tell his son before bed, about a prince who saved his kingdom through kindness instead of force. At that moment, he realized that his search was only just beginning. Finding the place where his son was being held was only the first step. Now he needed to confront years of family grievances, understand the pain of a brother who had felt abandoned, and find a way to reunite his family without further destroying the bonds that were already so fragile. The millionaire remained still for several minutes, listening to the familiar voice of his brother on the other side of the door. The stories he told were exactly the same ones they had both heard from their father when they were children, before the family fortune created a barrier between them. The girl beside him watched his expression with curiosity, as if trying to decipher the complex feelings crossing his face. "Aren't you going to knock on the door?" she whispered, breaking the tense silence. "Not yet," he replied, his mind working frantically. "I need to better understand the situation before I act." During the following days, the millionaire established a routine he never imagined for his life. Every night, After feigning normalcy at his business commitments and meetings about dividends and financial investments, he descended into the underground tunnels with the girl as his guide. She had shown him other accesses to the underground complex, some through basements of old houses, others through disguised entrances in public parks. What he discovered during these explorations left him deeply disturbed. His brother had created a true underground home, complete with an improvised ventilation system, restored furniture, and even a small library. It was clear that he had lived there for years, not just a few months. Old family photographs decorated the stone walls, including many of the millionaire himself that he didn't even remember existed. "He's been collecting these photos for a long time," the girl explained during one of their nightly visits. "He says they're memories of when you guys were friends." The child had become his only source of information about the life his brother had built underground. Through her, he discovered that the man who kidnapped his son wasn't the monster he had imagined, but a deeply wounded person who had channeled his pain into a destructive obsession. "He cries sometimes," the girl recounted one night as they walked through the stone corridors. "Mostly when your son asks about his daddy. He always says that daddy's away on business, like he used to when he was little." This revelation hit the millionaire like a punch to the gut. His constant travels for investments and business expansion had created a pattern that his brother was now replicating, using the same excuse their parents used when he himself questioned his father's absences. The situation became even more complicated when he discovered that his brother wasn't alone in his activities. During his nightly observations, he noticed that other people occasionally visited the underground complex. They were mostly homeless people whom his brother secretly helped, offering temporary shelter and food to anyone in need. "He's like an angel to us," said an elderly man whom the girl introduced as one of the kidnapping brothers' friends. "Never asks for anything in return, just helps when he can. Says he knows what it's like to be forgotten by the world." The millionaire began to question everything he thought he knew about the situation. His brother wasn't simply a kidnapper driven by revenge, but someone who had transformed his pain into compassion for the less fortunate. This made the situation even more emotionally complex. During the second week of surveillance, he witnessed something that completely changed his perspective. Through a crack in the wall of one of the chambers, he saw his brother playing with his son. The child was clearly well cared for, clean and fed. More than that, he seemed genuinely happy. He laughed at his uncle's antics, who demonstrated a patience and affection that the millionaire recognized as familiar. It was exactly how his brother played with him when they were kids. "Uncle, why do you live down here?" the boy asked during one of their games. "Because sometimes the people we love forget about us," the brother replied, his voice laden with sadness. "But it doesn't mean we stop loving them." The millionaire's heart ached upon hearing these words. He realized that he had spent years completely oblivious to his brother's suffering, focused only on multiplying his wealth and expanding his business. While he celebrated each new successful investment and each increase in his net worth, his brother languished in a loneliness that he himself had created through his emotional neglect. The girl, who had become his confidant on this surreal journey, began to show signs of inner conflict. It was clear that she'd become attached to both sides of the situation, to the man who had taken her in off the streets, and to the millionaire who demonstrated a vulnerability that he rarely showed to the world. "Why don't you guys just talk?" she asked one night after another session of silent observation. "You're both sad thinking about each other." "It's complicated," the millionaire tried to explain. "Sometimes families hurt each other so much that it's hard to fix. But you love each other," she said with the disarming simplicity of children. "I see it in your eyes when you talk about each other." During the third week, the situation took an unexpected turn. The brother began to suspect that he was being watched. He changed his routines, explored different areas of the tunnels, and even questioned the girl about her whereabouts during the day. "He's getting nervous," the child reported after a tense conversation with the man who had taken her in. "I think he knows someone is coming here." The millionaire realized that his strategy of silent observation was coming to an end. Soon he would be discovered, and then the whole situation could deteriorate rapidly. He needed to make a decision about how to approach his brother before it was too late. It was then that something happened that drastically accelerated events. During one of his nightly visits, he found the tunnels unusually silent. The girl led him to the place where he usually heard the voices, but this time there was no sound coming from the chamber where his brother lived with his son. "They're not here," whispered the child, clearly worried. "Maybe they went to the other place." "What other place?" "There's a big room deeper in the tunnels. He goes there when he wants to be alone to think. He said that's where he keeps the most important things." Following the girl through corridors that delved even further into the subterranean labyrinth, the millionaire mentally prepared himself for what he might find. With each step, he felt that he was approaching not only his son, but a confrontation with truths about himself that he had avoided for years. When they finally reached the deepest chamber of the tunnels, what they saw through the opening in the wall left them breathless. It was a large room, illuminated by several candles, where his brother had created a kind of family sanctuary. Photographs of the entire family history covered the walls, from his grandparents to recent photos of the millionaire himself and his son. In the center of the room, his brother was sitting in an old chair, holding a letter in his trembling hands. Beside him, the millionaire's son slept peacefully on a small couch, covered with a blanket that he recognized as being from the family home where they grew up together. But what shocked him most was seeing his brother silently crying as he read the letter. It was the same letter he had found in the chest buried in the cemetery, but this time he realized that they were drafts of several letters that were never sent, all addressed to him. The millionaire watched his brother through the crack in the wall, his heart pounding as he saw decades of unmailed letters scattered across the floor of the chamber. Each piece of paper represented a silent cry for connection, a desperate attempt to keep alive a family bond that had been neglected by years of ambition and relentless pursuit of wealth. The girl beside him gently touched his arm, whispering, "Now he'll know you're here. He always knows when someone is watching." As if he had heard the child's words, the brother slowly raised his head from the letters, his eyes scanning the room until they fixed exactly in the direction where they were hiding. For a moment that seemed like an eternity. The two brothers stared at each other through the opening in the stone wall, years of grievances and misunderstandings hanging in the air like a heavy cloud. "I knew you'd come eventually," said the brother, his voice echoing through the subterranean chamber. "You were always persistent when you wanted something, even when we were kids." The millionaire felt his legs tremble, but forced himself to emerge from his hiding place and enter the room. Each step towards his brother was like traversing years of estrangement and denial. The girl remained at the entrance, anxiously watching the encounter that she had helped orchestrate without even realizing it. "Where have you been all these years?" asked the millionaire, his voice coming out weaker than he intended. "Here. I've always been here," replied the brother, gesturing to the walls covered with family photographs. "Watching your prosperous life from afar, seeing you build an empire with the money that should have been ours." The millionaire's son began to stir on the couch, slowly waking up. When he saw his father, his eyes lit up with genuine joy. "Daddy, you came to get me. Uncle said you were traveling for a long time." The father's heart broke as he saw the child's innocent happiness, completely oblivious to the complexity of the situation. He ran to embrace his son, feeling immense relief in confirming that he was well cared for and healthy. "He was never mistreated," said the brother, anticipating the millionaire's thoughts. "I would never do to a child what I felt when our parents rejected me." "Why did you do this?" asked the millionaire, still holding his son. "Why did you kidnap my boy? So that you would feel what I felt when I was forgotten by my own family," replied the brother, his hands trembling as he held one of the unmailed letters, so that you would understand what it means to have someone you love simply disappear from your life. The girl entered the room silently, approaching the brother as she always did when he showed sadness. Her presence seemed to calm him, and he pulled her close, demonstrating the same paternal affection he had shown with the millionaire's son. "This little one has taught me more about family than years of wealth ever could," continued the brother, stroking the girl's hair. "She had nothing, just as I had nothing after you guys forgot me. But together, we've created something real down here." The millionaire looked around the chamber, noticing details he had ignored in his first observation. There were children's books carefully organized, handmade toys, drawings glued to the walls. It was an improvised home, but full of genuine love. "I didn't know," he said, finally finding the courage to approach his brother. "I never knew you felt abandoned. I thought you were happy studying abroad." "I never went abroad," revealed the brother, a tear rolling down his face. "I spent all these years right here, working odd jobs, living on the streets until I discovered these tunnels. You were so busy multiplying your fortune that you never questioned the story our parents told." The truth hit the millionaire like an avalanche. For years, he had assumed that his brother was living comfortably with the resources that the family had allocated for his education. He never questioned, never investigated, never cared enough to check if the story was real. "The letters," said the millionaire, looking at the papers scattered on the floor. "You wrote to me. Hundreds of them. Over 5 years," replied the brother, picking up one of the most recent ones. "Telling about my life, asking for help, trying to explain that I had never left, but I never had the courage to send them. I knew you were too busy with your stock investments and your Wall Street applications to worry about a brother who everyone believed was doing fine." The millionaire picked up one of the letters and began to read. The words were a devastating portrait of loneliness and abandonment, but also of a fraternal love that persisted despite everything. Each line revealed the depth of the pain he had caused, simply by his emotional neglect. "I saw when you got married," continued the brother, his voice growing weaker. "I watched from afar when your wife got sick, when she passed away, when you closed yourself off even more to the world. I wanted so badly to be able to comfort you, but I didn't know how to approach you after so many years." The mention of his deceased wife made the millionaire's heart clench painfully. He remembered how he had isolated himself after the loss, focusing even more intensely on business and wealth accumulation as a way to avoid dealing with the emotional pain. "When you became a father," continued the brother, "I thought I might finally find a way to get back into your life. But you were so protective, so focused on giving your son everything that money could buy, that there was no room for anyone else. And then you decided to kidnap my son," said the millionaire, struggling to keep his anger under control. "I knew it was wrong," admitted the brother, looking at the child who was sleeping again in his arms. "But I was desperate. Years of unmailed letters, years watching your life from afar, years feeling that I had ceased to exist for my own family. I thought that if you felt the same pain that I felt, maybe you could understand me." The girl, who had remained silent during the conversation, finally spoke. "He took good care of the boy, like he takes care of me. He just wanted you to be his brother again." Her simple words cut through all the justifications and rationalizations, going straight to the heart of the matter. The millionaire looked at the brother he had lost, at the son he had recovered, and at the girl who had been the bridge between worlds, separated by pride and misunderstandings. "What do we do now?" asked the millionaire, finally sitting down on the floor of the chamber, as they used to do when they were children, playing in the backyard of the family mansion. "I don't know," replied the brother. "For 5 years I imagined this moment. But now that it's here, I realize that my revenge has brought no relief, only more pain for all of us." The girl approached the millionaire and took his hand, then did the same with the brother. On the street, when people fight, they hug afterwards, then they're friends again. The two men looked at the child, then at each other. Decades of life had passed, fortunes had been accumulated and lost, families had been formed and broken apart. But there, in that candle-lit subterranean chamber, with two children as witnesses, they were again just two brothers who had lost their way to each other. Slowly, the millionaire extended his arms towards his brother. It was a hesitant gesture at first, laden with years of hurt and regret. But when they finally embraced, 5 years of isolation and pain began to dissolve. "Can we start over?" whispered the millionaire. "We can try," replied the brother, his tears wetting the shoulder of the brother he had rediscovered. The girl clapped softly, and the millionaire's son woke up again, smiling as he saw the two men embracing. "Now we're a big family," exclaimed the child, not fully understanding the magnitude of the moment he was witnessing. And there, in the depths of the city, surrounded by photographs of a past that could finally be honored and letters of a future that was now possible, the brothers began the long process of rebuilding not only their relationship, but a family that money and pride had almost destroyed forever. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment on what you thought of my story, giving it a score from 0 to 10. And thank you very much.